Good morning, lovely people. Happy Friday. Happy Friday. All righty. I'm gonna give you a few minutes to possibly finish your sex-linked worksheet. And we're gonna do pedigree today. So if you have already turned in this worksheet, go to Canvas and look at the unit on pedigree because that's what we're going to talk about today. All right, any questions about this one? So I know I did up to number 4 for you. So hopefully you all will copy that down. Number 5, it said a normal-sighted woman whose father was colorblind. So remember, she had to get an X from dad and an X from mom. So she got the X from dad. And he was colorblind. That gene was on his X chromosome. And then she marries a man who's colorblind. So he's XY, but his X chromosome has the colorblind gene on it. So that's how you set that one up. Those had B's on them for color blindness. These have H's on them. All right, so I'll give you a few minutes to work on that if you haven't already turned that in. All right. Also, a reminder that next week, you all have the advantage of some extra study time because your test isn't until Friday, but we will be reviewing this unit. So we'll save karyotyping, which is the last thing in this unit, for after the test. So we'll go back and review mitosis and meiosis and genetics leading up to Friday's test. All right, I'm going to, all right, let's see. Man, it's taking forever to load. Okay, here we go. You are correct. Perfect.
Yeah, I just wanted to double check if I'm on the right track.
That was exactly right. Yeah, marker absent for now. She comes back. What is this? Now my attendance isn't acting right. Okay. Think we got it now. All right, Malaysia, I think it's playing games with you because it's got you in twice. Or at least this time you're in. All right. Pedigree, pedigree, pedigree. Let's look at pedigree. Now, most of you have heard of pedigree because you've heard it mostly in reference to dogs, making sure that the dogs continue a bloodline. If you like the characteristics of the dog and they're strong, they breed them so that they continue to have those characteristics. And in order to do that, they got to know what their pedigree is. So you're tracing their characteristics from one generation to the next. So what a pedigree actually is this graphic organizer that tells you what traits are passed from one generation to the next. So we just learned how to do a Punnett square. Now we're going to learn how to read this diagram. And there's some rules to it. So these are the rules down here, that the males are always squares, females are always circles. If the square is shaded, that means they are affected with whatever characteristics that we want to be talking about. And if they have a line through it, that means they're deceased. It's also set up according to generations. All right, we're going to watch the Amoeba Sisters for a minute, and then we're going to come back and look at that, and then we're going to work on a worksheet, some practice questions.
Dave! Coach, take me back to the last quarter of that sprint. How did you...
So I have a really awesome picture for you. Here it is. Oh, it might look like circles and squares to you, but make no mistake, this is no ordinary picture. This is a pedigree. A pedigree is like a family tree. It can show information about an inherited trait passed across generations. And this one is actually a small pedigree of us. Well, our human forms. See, that's me, my sister, my mom, my dad. I'm not arbitrarily picking random shapes to represent us either. In a pedigree, the circles represent females, squares represent males. One way you can remember that is the letter C for circle comes before the letter S for square in the alphabet. Alphabetically, the letter F for female comes before the letter M for male. I've got to think about letters of the alphabet, though. I realize that might not work for everyone. So if we take a look at this pedigree, these Roman numerals represent generations. There's 2 generations here. This between my parents is called a marriage line. This line here connects parents to children, so you could see there are 2 children from this marriage. Now you may wonder, why are some of these shapes shaded? What does that mean? Well, the shaded shapes represent a trait that is being tracked in the pedigree. Here are 2 important facts about the particular trait I am choosing to track. Fact number 1 about this trait being tracked is that it's recessive. Recall that in typical Mendelian inheritance, dominant alleles, if present, will lead to the expression of dominant traits. Recessive alleles only are expressed when the dominant allele is not present. Now, fact number 2 about this trait is that it is an autosomal recessive trait. Just a reminder that autosomal means a chromosome that is not a sex chromosome. In human body cells, there are 46 chromosomes. The first 44, 22 pairs, are autosomes. The last 2, 1 pair, are sex chromosomes.
Whoops. I was trying to get it. Actually, it went back and I was just trying to pause it.
Across generations.
Hold on.
I'm not arbitrarily picking random shapes to represent us either. In a pedigree, the circles represent females, squares represent males. One way you can remember that is the letter C for circle comes before the letter S for square in the alphabet. Alphabetically, the letter F for female comes before the letter M for male. I've got to think about letters of the alphabet, though. I realize that might not work for everyone. So if we take a look at this pedigree, these Roman numerals represent generations. There's 2 generations here. This between my parents is called a marriage line. This line here connects parents to children.
Okay, so there are rules for making pedigree. So you got to remember that this is the rules. You need to know what these lines mean. So it's a horizontal line, and they have these notes on Canvas. That means they're married. These 2 are married. If it's a vertical line, that leads to the offspring. Okay, so and it's got to be connected to this line for the offspring, because we're going to have some extended ones, but if they're not connected here, they're not the offspring of those 2 parents.
You can see there are 2 children from this marriage. Now you may wonder, why are some of these shapes shaded? What does that mean? Well, the shaded shapes represent a trait that is being tracked in the pedigree. Here are 2 important facts about the particular trait I am choosing to track. Fact number 1 about this trait being tracked is that it's recessive. Recall that in typical Mendelian inheritance, dominant alleles, if present, will lead to the expression of dominant traits. Recessive alleles only are expressed when the dominant allele is not present. Now, fact number 2 about this trait is that it is an autosomal recessive trait. Just a reminder that autosomal means a chromosome that is not a sex chromosome.
But review. This is vocabulary. Remember what an autosome is. It's not a sex chromosome.
In human body cells, there are 46 chromosomes. The first 44, 22 pairs, are autosomes. The last 2, 1 pair,
All right, so this is what I said we're going to do after the exam. This is a karyotype, which is a map of all the chromosomes. We lay them out, we look at what size they are, and we kind of examine what's on each of these chromosomes. And the last 2 over here, so there's 23 pairs of these, and this last pair, 22 pairs of autosomal chromosomes. The last 2 that make up the 23 are the sex chromosomes, and they're going to be XX or XY.
Sex chromosomes. So this trait is not sex-linked since it is autosomal, and that means it does not need to be written as coefficients on the sex chromosomes. So what is the trait we're tracking? Attached earlobes. Yes, you might not realize it, but look around and you'll see that humans, they have free or attached earlobes. Although we want to point out that there may be more than just these 2 categories for earlobes. And while this example is used often in basic genetics, there's probably more to this than just one simple gene. For our example, let's assume a simple gene trait, and that free earlobes is dominant, meaning at least one dominant allele must be around. Attached earlobes is recessive, showing when no dominant allele is present. So if we were to put the genotypes next to each of these shapes, what would they be? Well, the shaded ones would be easy, because we just mentioned that attached earlobes is the trait we're tracking, and it's an autosomal recessive trait. So if we use the letter E, then these shaded shapes must be lowercase e. Any capital dominant letter, and the individual would have to have free earlobes and not be shaded. So let's look at individual 2 in the first generation. That's our father. He's not shaded, so he can't be little e, little e. What about big E, big E? Well, there's a problem. See his children? Us. Each child must get an allele from each parent. So if I received a little e from my mom, then I had to get the other little e from my dad. Therefore, he can't be big E, or he'd have no little e to give. His genotype must be the heterozygote genotype, big E, little e. He's what we call a carrier, though. He still has a phenotype of free earlobes because of that one capital, but he carries the lowercase allele. Now, that's just one tiny pedigree. Let's look at a big family reunion. Well, an imaginary one, because I have to confess I don't really know whether our relatives have free or attached earlobes. I thought about sending a survey to them, but it just felt a little awkward. So here we go. Big, giant, imaginary family of relatives. Okay, just to make sure you understand this, how many siblings does my dad have? Well, look, here's my dad in generation 2, number 4. He has 3 siblings, all brothers, right here. What is the phenotype of my paternal grandfather? Well, look, here's my dad. Here's my dad's dad. That would be my paternal grandfather. And because his square is shaded, that means his phenotype is attached earlobes. Okay, so let's go ahead and label all these shaded shapes with the genotype little e, since we know that's the trait we're tracking. Now take a look at generation 1, individual 1. That would be my paternal grandmother. What's her genotype? We know it's not little e, or her shape would be shaded. But if we went with big E, could that still work? Yes, all the offspring could get a big E from her and a little e from my grandfather. But what about big E, little e? Would that work too? Yes, because the children could still get a big E from her and a little e from my grandfather. It may be less of a probability, but it's possible, and therefore we must list both, that she is a big E, or big E, little e, because we don't know. All the offspring of my paternal grandparents, though, they're going to have to be big E, little e. Remember, they have to get an allele from each parent, and that means they're going to have to pick up that little e from my grandfather. They will be heterozygotes, and that's the only option here. Pause this video and try to solve the right side of this pedigree now. Ta-da! Imaginary family done. So how'd you do? Well, here are some of the tricky ones. Did you see that generation 1, individual 4, has to be a carrier only? Because if not, then the shaded individual children would not be able to get the little e that they have, because they have to get a little e from both parents. How about individual 9? This female married in, but that's not the reason that she can be either big E or big E, little e. If you look at the children, they aren't shaded. So while they will have to get a little e from number 8, as that's all number 8 can give, the other capital letter can be obtained from number 9 regardless of whether she's big E, or big E, little e. Remember, one option may be more likely, but if it's possible, you need to include both. Now, remember how we made a big deal about how this was an autosomal pedigree? Well, what if you're dealing with a sex-linked trait and therefore a sex-linked pedigree? There are a lot of sex-linked recessive traits. Color blindness and some male patterns of baldness can be sex-linked. Let's pretend now that we're told this is a sex-linked recessive trait. I'm going to keep the old labeled pedigree here that showed an autosomal recessive trait just for comparison, but now here's a brand new sex-linked pedigree. First of all the females, the circles, should have an XX to indicate 2 X sex chromosomes by them. Remember, females have 2 X chromosomes. Males should have an XY to indicate an X and a Y sex chromosome. That's always a good thing to do first. Now remember that we were told this pedigree is tracking sex-linked recessive traits. So the shaded one here has the sex-linked recessive trait. A reminder from our sex-linked video about how this works. Let's use the letter R for an allele. Now recall that females that do not have the trait, they can be either this or this, and the heterozygote genotype, this, is a carrier. She doesn't have the trait herself because of the dominant allele, but she's carrying it. Only a female that is this will have the sex-linked recessive trait. So if I'm looking at this pedigree, what would the genotype for individual 1 in generation 1 be? Well, notice here she has 3 children, and one of her sons here is shaded. Where does her son get his Y sex chromosome from? The father. Where does he get his X sex chromosome from? his mother. Individual 1 doesn't have the trait, or she would be shaded, but she must be a carrier if her son received an X chromosome with a recessive allele on it. Now, what about individual 2 in generation 2? Well, she can be this, like her mother, but look, she could also be this, because it's possible to get one of those from each parent. If it's possible, you must include it. Now, pause the video and try the last female. How'd you do? Remember, the key here is to always check and make sure that when you look at a child, they have to be able to get one of their alleles from each parent. Now remember that both of these examples were recessive. It doesn't have to be that way. On our handout, you can try one that follows an autosomal dominant trait. If it's a dominant allele that you're tracking, remember it would only take one dominant allele for a person to have that trait. Another quick thing to point out is sometimes you will see pedigrees that are have shaded. Well, that's just awesome because they're basically letting you know that the have shaded ones are carriers. If I wanted to turn our first one into that have shading, then it would look like this. Mapping and understanding pedigrees is important, especially as we continue to make advancements in understanding how genetic disorders are inherited. Well, that's it for the Amoeba Sisters, and we remind you to stay curious.
Alrighty, so we are going back to the module. So we're in the module, we're looking at pedigree, the lesson. All right, so again, you have to remember what the rules are. You have to remember always, the squares are male, circles are females. Shaded means they are, and the question will always tell you what disease you're tracking. So whether, or what trait, not always a disease, what traits you're tracking, and whether they are deceased or not. Well, they'll have the line going through it. All right, so you've got some rules over here, and that's what we just discussed. And again, it also tells you that the horizontal lines mean they're married, and the vertical lines represent those offspring of those that are married. So and you got to be careful because it's in the next generation, they're also going to show you that they married somebody. So we're not, when in this generation, all of these are not children. Only the ones that have lines connected are children. So in this case, they had 4 children. Okay, and then those 4 children, these 2 are married, these 2 are married, those 2 are married, and those 2 are married. Then these had 3 children. This one had 2 children. This one had 1, and this one had 3 children. Okay, so you got to be able to follow those lines. All righty. She also talked about carriers. Okay, and one of the famous pedigree lines that they I thought about you with a commercial, Andre. They have a commercial now for the AI Jurassic Park. Made it look like a theme park again. But I doubt your hybrid dinosaur though. Alrighty. So this is a famous, and in fact, this is the one that they used to study hemophilia as they were trying to look at genetics. And they figured in the royal family that hemophilia started with Queen Elizabeth. And look at all in each gender following, and she had many children. And these 2, and notice these, there were 2 girls and 1 boy. But they were able to pass on, this one passed on the hemophilia to those boys. But look how many people were also carriers. All right, so what we're going to do, we're going to look at, so just click on the next page, and you should come up to the worksheet, Harry Potter pedigrees. And I don't know why it's called that because they didn't really have the names of the Harry Potter people, but mine is just, why is it spinning round and round? It should have been loaded a long time ago. Anyway, yours will probably load. Mine is going to go through the complications just to be annoying. All right, this is what I'm going to do. I'm just going to pull up my worksheet and we'll look at it from there. Alrighty, so this is the worksheet that should come up when you click on that link. And the first part of the worksheet is just information, basically the same thing that you just saw in Canvas. So they tell you that pedigree is a diagram, and this is the key up here for the diagram. And okay, so again, the squares are males without a trait, without the trait that you're looking for. Darkened squares have the trait. Females are circled, darkened circles have the trait. This one, they have it where they're small if they died. Stick with the line going through it. That's easier to tell whether they're large or small. Okay. This one over here is different that you hadn't seen before. That represents twins. All right. So this one, they tell you that there's, and each one is called a generation. So each row represents a generation. So this is 3 generations. Right. So those are the parents. They had 3 children and 1 son-in-law. And we know he's a son-in-law because that's a square. And then only that one married couple offspring had an offspring. So there's 1 grandchild. Okay. Next, they tell you that the thing that they are tracking is going to be colored in. So that means that number 2, or the female, has whatever trait they're tracking, and they're going to use the symbols BB. And 3 and 4 are normal, but 2 has inherited whatever disability they're representing here. Okay. All right. Pedigree. So that's the first one. So we're going to say this was colored. Sorry, they did tell you up here. Blue eyes. And blue eyes is recessive. Okay. Blue eyes is recessive. So that means that mom is blue eyes. And she would have passed on 1. She had 2, that means she had 2 small b's. She would have passed 1 on to each of these children, except dad, who is normal, probably passed on a regular, had to have, wait a second now. He has to, I don't know how they figured that. Non-colored ones are, she's small b, but he has to be capital B and a Y. Okay, so these got capital B's, but they also got a lowercase b. So these 2 have to be heterozygous. Okay. And why this one is colorblind, I don't know, because if that is not colorblind, that means he had a regular capital B. So that one, I don't understand how they got that one. But they just shaded it that way, I guess, for demonstration purposes. Because the male only has an X and a Y. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, color, this one, this is eye color, not color blindness, eye color. So this is autosomal, okay? This is autosomal. So this is just regular BB, capital B's or little b. So dad had 2 capital B's, or now he had to have a capital B. Okay, forgive me. Forgive me. Dad, like she said in the video, had to be able to give a lowercase b to the child. So dad has to be capital B, lowercase b. Mom is 2 lowercase b's because she already has it. So they got dad's lowercase b. That's why they got blue eyes. These 2 got the normal gene, the capital B from dad, but they got the lowercase b from mom. So they are both heterozygous, but they're going to have brown eyes. They're not going to have blue eyes. They're going to have brown eyes. Okay. All right. This one who has two small b's has an offspring. So that means that has blue eyes. So that means the person that she married also, even though he had brown eyes, also is carrying the gene for blue eyes. So he had to be big B, little b in order to pass it on. So he got the little b from dad and little b from mom. Okay. All right. Hopefully I haven't thoroughly confused you. Ah. All right. So again, this is blue eyes is autosome. That means it's not sex linked. So we're just looking at the big B's and little b's here. All right, down here. Now we're looking at sex linked. Okay. All right, so we're looking at hemophilia this time, which is a sex linked, which means you're going to express it. And it's all those sex linked diseases are recessive, as they said in the movie. So it's going to be and found on the X chromosome, not on the Y chromosome, which is why it shows up, because there's nothing on the Y chromosome to mask it. Okay. All right. So the only thing that's going to show is that little H when it's a male. If it's a female, you can have one normal H and one recessive H on the X chromosome, because one X chromosome can have a capital H, the other X chromosome can have the lowercase h, and they still be normal because that capital H is going to mask or cover up that little h. But on a male, the only thing they're going to have is that one X, and there's nothing on the Y to stop it from being shown or expressed. Okay, so in this diagram, everybody seems to be normal in this generation. So this one, these two were married and they have all normal children. Okay, nobody has hemophilia. Then this one marries somebody from this family and they have a child and they're normal. But this one has 3 children, and of the 3 children that they have, this one has hemophilia. So that means they had to get an X with a lowercase h from dad, because they can get the normal, because they have to get she's normal, and so she has 2 X's with a capital H, and he's normal. But he can only, actually, no, let me back that up. Mom has a lowercase h because dad can only give a Y. If this is a male, he gave a Y. Okay, so he gives the Y, she gives an X, but the X that she gave has hemophilia. Okay, so Y from dad, X from mom makes a male. And this male has hemophilia, so that means mom was heterozygous, even though she looks normal. This child, these two, he turned around and married someone who looked normal, but then they had a hemophilia offspring, which means she had to be heterozygous as well, because she had to give her X for his Y. And then that child has hemophilia. Okay, so he didn't get the X from dad. He got a Y from dad, but he got an X from mom that had hemophilia. Okay. All righty. Now it's your turn to play with this. So all of that was just information. Down here, they give you some more information, but now they're asking you to look at this diagram and explain who's related to who and what is their role. So they give you the first one is already done for you. Number, and they're always numbered. So in our first generation, we have number 1 is a female because it's a circle. They're asking you what is number 5. Number 5 is a square, and we know that that's an offspring from this marriage because there's a line connecting them. So 1 and 5 are mother and son. Okay? So you need to say it like that. You need to not only say how they're related, what is their gender. So you have to say like they did mother and son and identify them by number. All right, so you do 1 and 10, 3 and 5, 1 and 2. You do those. Let's start with that for the next few minutes. Just get through that one. And then we'll analyze. So these questions are asking you to analyze what you got up there. Y'all didn't tell me I was muted. Okay, I'll be right back. You all finished the worksheet. All right, everybody figured it out. So I was saying that you should be working on this right now. Turn this in 2 days, should not be late. Because next week we're reviewing for the test, so we will not be doing this next week. I want to see everybody's here today. Everybody should be turning this worksheet in today. Actually, somebody left, but then if they don't turn it in, they don't turn it in. Folks, classwork during class time. Let's get it done. I gave you the answers for the first part. You fill in the next part. How many grandchildren? Based on those grandchildren, which of them are colorblind? And they ask you down here to put 2 and 2 together based on the circled number of circles and squares. If you look in this diagram, all of the people with the color blindness are squares. What is that telling you? That's what this number 3 is asking. All right, this one you're going to have to label like she did in the video. Decide whether they are homozygous for the trait or heterozygous for the trait. Keep in mind that this married couple produced 4 children. 1, 2, 3, 4. But in order for them to produce girls, notice these are circles. In order for them to produce girls, dad had to give an X with carrying the gene, and so did mom. In order for these to possibly, and you might want to draw out a Punnett square to prove this one. These are always easy to test out because you can draw the Punnett square to prove your answer. So I would start with a Punnett square that actually shows where you had 2 little e's, sorry, two little d's, 2 little d's, and figure out how they got that. All right, I just took me a minute, but I drew this out, so you might want to draw this out on your paper as well. So for that group, again, this is sex linked. So we had to say mom with the XX and dad. We also had to attach those to the little D's to the X chromosomes. Okay. So this is the female and this is the male. All right, so you got a few more minutes to finish working that one out. And again, I expect y'all to get this done and turn it in before you go. All right, good people. It's lunchtime. Again, make sure you turn this in. All right, see y'all next week. Bye.